We'll do that tomorrow. And here's somebody that's going to let us know how he feels as well. Phil Bennett, longtime college football coach and former Baylor defensive coordinator. Phil, Baylor's a mess. I want to get into Texas OU quite a bit, but we'll come off of what we just mentioned with JJ. And he mentioned it, man. They need to stop worrying about being pristine and image and branding and need to get in some football players. What say you?
Well, yeah, I agree with JJ. I mean, it's obvious to me that there's a lack of toughness, and really, it's hard to win, David, when you can't stop the run and you can't run the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the difference in that game. I mean, they were physical, we were not, and Tech dominated from start to finish, and did not carry over anything from the second half of UCF. And right now, I think one of the players said it. There's too much standing around waiting for somebody else to do something, but it wasn't very impressive.
Phil, you had a team that had a bad start to a season and then was one of the better closes to a season that maybe in the Big 12 that anybody could see in the way that you guys rebooted and started. Talent aside on that, because you guys knew you had it and you just weren't hitting on all cylinders. Dave Aranda believes he has it, but how did you guys reboot your season when you had a losing record?
Paul, I told you last week, or really before the UCF game, when you're at this stage where they're at, you got to find out, hey, listen, this is what we can do, and we can win doing this. I see too many things. I mean, defensively, we don't do enough. We're too vanilla to stop the run. Obviously we're not good enough in base to stop the run. So we need to do some things to create problems for the offense. We don't do that, but you got to find things you can do. Number one, to give you a chance. The other thing offensively is if you're, every week you scout yourself. And if there's a area that you just can't get it done, don't do it anymore. Look at another avenue. And I know things go from game to game, but I go back to this. The team who usually can run the ball and stop the run is going to win the game. And that was a prime example in the Tech Baylor game. Now, obviously, too, you got to only play the players that deserve to play. I mean, there's times you have to make decisions and say, you know what, this is what we want. You're not giving it to us. We're going to give somebody else a chance. And I've had that happen, and guys really come to the top, and you get better with that.
How would you approach this bye week? Like, how does that kind of unfold in your mind, especially given the circumstances of what they're coming off of?
Well, these kids and these coaches are hearing all the negatives. And what they've got to do, they've got to tune it out, and they've got to take ownership of this season. The season's not over by any stretch of the imagination. I've said this before, there's games to be won. And what they've got to do is they've got to go out, look at the areas that they're not good at, find out what they can do, and work on it. It becomes a work week. I mean, this week should be a work week to get better on themselves, not anybody else, but on themselves. And then next week, start your game prep. And I think you have to look at it like that, or you're not going to grow as a team.
Phil, you mentioned Monterey Baldwin, what he said in the postgame. Last question about Baylor. He basically said that there are too many players who are just happy to be here for the ride. If you ever would have heard that as a coach on a team that's an assistant, a coordinator, or a head coach, what would you have done if you knew that?
Well, I mean, sometimes, kids say things, but I don't know the total situation, but I don't think in all my years, David, I don't think I've really heard that from a player. I've heard them say we got to get better, but I really hadn't had one say, hey, we got too many guys here just for the ride. And you know what? Unfortunately, at times it looks like that might be true.
All right. Oklahoma, Brent Venables, year 2. They worked the portal. They recruited their asses off, and they look like it's a night and day difference for them.
No question. No question. And the thing too that in that game, Texas, had almost 600 yards, but 3 turnovers were the difference in the game, and they were forced turnovers. Oklahoma's D-line totally dominated the line of scrimmage, and those 3 turnovers gave, along with the great job that Levy and Seth Luttrell did with the offense, was a winning formula.
Phil, a lot of times in big rivalry games, things get sloppy and you're tense and all that. I came away impressed with that game and that it was just a really good game. And look, both teams played well at times. Both teams, it didn't seem like anybody made mistakes because the moment was too big for them.
Well, I'm going to tell you, I've been to a bunch. I've been involved, watched Texas OU a long time, and you're right. It was a highly competitive, well coached, both sides of the ball. Things. One would score. And I said I was actually in San Antonio watching Incarnate Word, and I told one of the coaches there after Texas had scored, and I said they might have scored too quick. And sure enough, Jeff. And what happened? The only thing I would be critical of Texas is they went into sort of like a prevent defense. They didn't do what they had been doing against Gabriel the last 2 series, a little bit of pressure, mixing it up. They sort of played soft, and he made them pay for it. He scrambled, and I tell you, Jeff did a really good job with a quarterback run game. And I don't think he has asked him to run as much as he did in that game, and it really helped him.
And if you're running that offense, a minute 15, does that feel like you have about 20 minutes to actually get the job done with as quickly as that thing can move and just hit a couple big plays and boom, you're down the field?
Well, no question. I mean, they do it every snap. And, I don't know if you remember this, but they caught Texas in a sub situation on the first. I think it was like they went about 15 yards on the first play, made a great play, threw a pass, and then they caught him in a sub situation and got an infraction, got a penalty, and had a free play, and sort of got him on the heels. And then I sat there and I said, "This is trouble." And then at the end of the game, and I don't understand this, but they ran a zone blitz, and the receiver that caught the touchdown pass, there was only a corner there, and there were 2 receivers. So they were a man short. They got him confused. And like, as I said, Gabriel really, you could tell he's mature. He's played a lot of football. The moment certainly was not big, too big for him. And if you remember a year ago, he didn't play in that game.
No.
And he missed that game, and what a difference he was.
When he threw the touchdown pass, I went back and stopped the video. He had, maybe I'm wrong, 6 to 8 guys around him, like it was a cocoon. And, defense and offensive players all around him. He's not a big, tall guy. How impressive, as a defensive coach, how impressive was it that he kept his poise and got that pass off?
Oh, it was very impressive. And I think I think the thing you saw, I think a lot of people saw that. He's not even 6 foot, but he was smooth. He knew, that old saying, knowledge is power. And I want to throw Jeff in there. Jeff's done a great job of teaching him where it's going. They were bringing some pressure from the field, and he knew to the nub side. He knew, what was there, and he never backed off. He didn't look at the rush. He knew where the breakdown was, and it became wide open. And he throws a very nice touch ball, very smooth, nice touch ball. He reminds me of Drew Brees.
What would you do if you were Mario Cristobal the last 48 hours?
Oh, man. I wish, I know Mario and I like him. I wish he would have just come out and said, hey, if you better own up to it. Of course, everybody at Baylor still remembers the UNLV Kevin Steele game.
Yep.
And, I want to tell you something. You look at the A&M Alabama game. I had no idea what Nick was doing at the end of the game when he threw the bubble. Did you see that,
yes.
guy?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all he had to do, And quarterback could have, give ground, come back, and taken all the ground. They could have taken the clock off. But when he threw the ball the first time, I'm thinking, oh my God, what is he doing? And then that night to see that, and I think it was almost, to the Aggies, it was a double bad day, because here's their old quarterback who they didn't think was good enough. Miami, beats them bad, and then he beats Miami on the last play of the game. So, it was a terrible mistake. And I read something, and Mario talked about, well, I've always done that. I'm not sure I would be telling that many people that when I make $8 million to win games. And it was, it's just you can't fix things like that. I mean, you tell the players, be smart, don't be selfish, don't do stupid things. And then as a coach, you just got to own up to it, and hopefully that you can get this team back.
He did it in 2018 and lost a game when he was at Oregon to Stanford. Same thing. It took him to overtime to do it as well. So yes, he has always done it that way. Phil, on A&M, Jimbo Fisher made a really bad clock decision in that one as well, burning a timeout when they were going to run the field goal team out. He also is very averse to going for it on fourth down. When that kind of has changed all across football. How did you feel about going for it on fourth down? Because he is near the bottom of the country. He goes for it less than one time a game per season.
Well, of course, spending 6 or 7 seasons with Art Briles, that's a given for me. I remember this. My wife is sitting here listening to me. Of course, our daughter was at Baylor. And before I went there, I was at Pitt. She told me one time, she said, I want to tell you what I love about Art. Before I was ever there, she says, he goes for it every fourth down. And lo and behold, the next thing I know, he's offering me a job. First thing she tells me, she goes, you better understand, he's going to go for it all over the field on fourth down. And and he did. But, at that point in that game, you send your kids a message. I love what Art did. I bought into it. Art says, hey, we're not backing up. No, we're not going to be stupid. If it's 4th and 6, we're way backed up. But he always lets the kids know our expectancy, hey, we're a 4-down team. And I think in all our years, we went for it more than anybody. I think Jimbo sent his players a bad message. It was less than a yard, and the ball was at midfield, and you're in a game that can really put you in the driver's seat in the SEC West, and yet you punt it. And I think that sort of at that point they lost the edge. I think they lost the momentum. The other thing, I think when they got down on the 2-yard line, when the kid stepped out and they got the penalty, the first play, if you remember it, they ran the ball, and they were sort of getting down there. The quarterback, they were throwing to the back. I would have liked this, and then, of course, they get a penalty. I'd like to see them try to throw on first down there. Because it looked like very obviously that Alabama's D-line was dominating A&M's front. So their only chance was try to get the ball on the perimeter. But, I thought that sent a bad message.
Coach, a few weeks ago, Alabama was, dead on arrival, losing to Texas, and now here they are in the huge win over A&M. What are your thoughts on what you've seen as they've adjusted the last month or so?
Kevin Steele's a good friend of mine. I talked to him last week, and he made a great statement. He said that, Milroe did not play versus South Florida. Nick came in, he really likes his young coordinator, but he told him, he said, listen, it's our best chance to win. Let's find out what he can do those things, and not ask him to do things he can't do. They played good defense all year. I think yards per snap, they're at 4 yards a snap. Defensively, I don't think they've given up. They're right around 290 yards a game, and I think that's played out. They beat Ole Miss, a very good team. They went to Mississippi State and won. And I really think he got his confidence in A&M. You know, A&M made a conscious decision on defense. We're going to crowd the front. We're going to be physical, and we're going to sort of leave our corners and safeties in coverage. And it didn't work for him. He ends up throwing for, I think, 337 yards, 3 touchdowns, and you know, they were able to dominate the run. You know, it's a crazy thing. Everybody talks about the SEC being physical, you know, O-line. Do you know what both of them average running per snap? 1 yard a carry. How about that, Dave?
Golly.
One of them wasn't. I don't think Alabama. I think they were 0.9, and A&M was 1-1. How about that?
That's ridiculous. So, Phil, I'm always going to be fascinated by Nick Saban and what he did with Jalen Milroe and what he was willing to endure and the confidence he had to win that game at South Florida, because he sent Jalen Milroe a message that game about how ugly he was willing to let it get if his attitude didn't change. And then not only that, if you're on that sideline and go, man, if we put Milroe in this game, this could change everything, and Coach Saban doesn't care, that sends a message to everybody, doesn't it?
Without a question. You know, one of Nick's strongest traits, and it's admired by everybody, is Nick and Bill Saban are two of a kind. Bill Snyder, is they believe in their process. And if you're not involved and you don't believe in that process, you can't be there. And you're exactly right. I mean, people ask, well, why didn't he play? Simple. He was not going to play. If it would have come down to triple overtime, he would have never got in that game because he was making a point. And you know what? It could pay off for him now. I still don't think they're a great dominant team, but it sure has paid dividends. You're exactly right.
You mentioned that he kind of himself threw that bubble screen, whatever it might have been. He admitted in the press conference that they won despite him. Nick Saban, who can walk on water as a football coach, immediately criticized himself in the press conference. I thought that was really pretty cool.
Well, you know, I'm going to give you an insight on that. You know what happened on that? Because I couldn't stand it. Before they got to the airport, I texted one of their coaches. I said, what in the... And like I said, I told you I was in San Antonio. He said, you always tie trailers with throws. You know, like it's read pass. You know, it's run pass. I'm sorry. And they saw everybody. A&M was playing the box. Everybody was in the box. So he said, hell, I'm just going to throw it out. It was one of his options. They didn't give a stay call, meaning the pass is not an option. Just run the ball. And this kid is not experienced enough to know, hey, I shouldn't throw the ball. And they didn't put a stay call with it. And that's exactly what happened. He did what they normally practice. Because if you look at the nickel, A&M's nickel, he was almost in the box. And let me say this, go back and look at that. If he catches the ball, he might score.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Hey, everybody that watches this, the chat room loves your segment with us. We appreciate you very much. Craig, you have one more with Coach?
Yeah, Coach, just here at the halfway point, based on your own eye test and expertise and all that, who are the 4 best teams in the country right now, in your opinion?
Well, I tell you, it's number one, until Georgia loses, they've got to be one of them. All right? I think Ohio State has proven that they're starting to get their mojo back. And then I would have to look at both Oregon. I like their quarterback, and I like the quarterback at Washington. Those would possibly be my 5. I don't think USC can ever be a championship team with playing defense the way they're playing it. I like Michigan, but I just don't know enough about them. Their quarterback, Michigan would be in there somewhere too. So you could say 5.
Well, and we'll get to talk to you about Oregon, Washington next week, so that'll be a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you, Coach. Appreciate it.
All right, guys.
The segment. Be good. That's Phil Bennett, former Baylor defensive coordinator, longtime college football coach, and is always